This week, we watch anime, but with style and grace.
And I add some long overdue female perspective.
Hi, I'm Kyle.
I'm his wife, Christine.
And we watch anime. What a special week we're going to have. We're going to cover a beautiful series, one that properly illustrates human motion, tells a touching love story, and still has enough space on the ice rink to involve nosebleeds and ecchi fan service at hot springs. That's right, we are covering the yaoi, romance, figure skating sports anime, Yuri, on ice. But before we begin, wait, you're not Garrett.
No, I certainly am not.
So before we start, do I know you? Yes, you know. It seems like you have a special relationship with me. What would that happen to be?
Yeah, I just happen to be married to you.
Oh, that's right. I'm in the house with my wife. What a lovely treat we have. This week we are doing a Super Noob review of Yuri on Ice. It's a great show. And I brought my wife along. Garrett is having a vacation this weekend, so we'll be having a nice, couples on the couch moment, maybe even almost a Netflix and chill moment with this anime. But before we begin, we want to encourage people to rate and comment on our podcast pages, as that's what we're going to get people's eyes on our podcast. So thank you in advance. So yeah, once again, this show is really interesting in that an anime came out before the manga. So the manga came out in 2017, but the anime came out in 2016. So this is a truly new property, and we're having our first crack at the yaoi and boy love genre. Even though this does a better job of handling the boy love relationship than other kind of versions of it. We'll talk about what that means in a bit. But first, let's talk a little bit about my guest here, my wife, Christine. So Christine, first questions first. What is it like to have a weeb as a husband?
Well, it's interesting. This is certainly the world of anime is something that I knew zero about before we started dating. And in fact, it took many years before you actually introduced it properly to me.
It's like showing off my pictures from when I was a baby. Like it's one of those things in which I'm like, hi, you're marrying this man. You're gonna be, thankfully, you'll be taking on my last name. Great. And then also, here's my nerdness.
I think you were smart in your approach because I am definitely a book lover. So to introduce me to manga first was a really good choice. So this is my first venture into anime, which is quite different.
Right. So, as I said, every time I go to a bookstore, I try to be like, ooh, I think you'd like this one. Ooh, I think you'd like this one or this one. And you have kind of taken on a few properties. Which ones have you taken on so far?
The first one I started off with, I know is a popular one. It's Death Note. And it was a really dark one.
It's an interesting, I know people are going to be like, why did you start her on that one? But I don't know. I didn't want her to start on anime breasts or something like that. I wanted to have.
Well, yeah. I mean, just looking at the covers of the books in that section, I'm like,
it's like don't look at the cat girl with a large rack on the front holding this very long gun. Don't worry about that. It's a real genre. It's a real something.
Honestly, it felt like I was in an adult section and it was embarrassing. But when you pointed me to Death Note, it seemed like it was not.
I was like, it's weird that like a Shinigami, a man that can kill someone by writing in a book, is enough to bring you down to earth in comparison to everything else. And also, I've introduced you to Skippy, which I think you really liked, right?
I do, yeah. I think what was interesting about that is I just wanted to get more of a feel of Japanese culture in general. And Skippy was a really good one to kind of understand how celebrity and talent is handled in their culture. So that's kind of a fun, lighthearted one to watch.
And what's crazy about these kind of shows is that also with manga, what you get over anime is that they'll explain cultural nuances of like suffixes and what this person's saying when they mean this, and they'll give you a little bit more context. So that's another reason why you should buy the manga is because you'll get that little extra out of it. But Christine, I picked this show for two reasons. One, I think you would have liked it.
I wonder why.
I know. And the second thing is, you're not really a sports fan, but the one thing you are a huge fan of is Olympics. and it's specifically figure skating.
I think that's an understatement.
Right. You have a huge proclivity for, like, I get really amped up watching football, and, like, I'll be like, football. But, like, if I come down the stairs and figure skating on, she's like, out, right?
Oh, yeah.
She's like, I want to make sure I see the technical score and all that stuff. So this is something that, while this medium is a new thing for you, Christine, the sport itself is something you're very familiar with. So you'll be able to actually give us a little bit of an expertise on it, so which I really like.
Happy to do it.
Yeah. So to start, as we normally do, you've listened to the show when Garrett does it. What I normally do here is I say, what is this show about? What is Yuri on Ice about? So maybe you can give us a quick synopsis on what the story is all entails.
What I would say about Yuri on Ice is it's about fabulous costumes,
Right.
music, drama, a little bit of flirtation.
Ooh.
All that encompasses the wonderful world of ice skating and makes me go, eee!
Yeah, you squeed a few times. Tears may have dropped, but we'll talk about that a little bit as we go over for it. I think the first thing that I think for me, even though figure skating and like boy love, yaoi is not necessarily my genre that I normally go to, the one thing I will give the show complete credit for is its production value. So I don't know about you, when you watched it, did you not think that, like, just visually this thing looks stunning?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I have to say, without having seen one anime before this, I half expected that all anime really needs to have like a disclaimer that it may cause seizures.
Right, like, you know, I'm transforming. Like, I think The Simpsons made fun of that too. Like, where it was like, careful, this causes seizures, and like, they flashed the entire episode.
Yeah, I expect it to be really fast moving,
right,
and just really overstimulation with visuals. But this was not that at all. It is just so pleasing to watch.
It really was. I would say from the color to the drawing to the way they even modeled human motion, I think it was really top notch.
The music too.
Oh, we're going to have to definitely give
contributing factor to that.
We are definitely going to give the music its own take. And in fact, you're not going to hear this, Christine, while we're recording this, but I'm going to be adding musical interludes to make sure that we're hitting our landings every time we do this. But first, some information that you need to know is that they're actually used, there's actually a record for this show. It broke the record for the most key animators. It took 48 people who were basically lead animators in different properties to make this show. So what that means is that normally a show would take, you know, a couple people, a few supervisors. This one took like all of them, put them into a giant room and just made sure they got all the intricate nature of each toe loop and triple lutz. And I think it shows in the way that it presented itself.
I mean, you can tell it's just really impressive.
And as someone who watches it, did it really exemplify what it looks like as motion?
Yeah, it did it really well. There are some things that obviously is super challenging to do to really get the footwork that's involved in it. But even when you watch it, a live person doing it, they move too fast for you to even be able to see it properly.
It's like watching hockey. You think everybody's going really slowly, but when you actually see it on ice, it's insanely fast.
Yeah.
So Kenji Miyamoto was the model for this. He was a figure skating champion. He was like 10-time. Did pairs with his partner Rie Matsuzaka, and they won the ICU 10 times in a row. So he actually did the competition that Yuri did. He's not based on what Yuri is, but they actually used a real figure skater and like drew him intricately to get these the motions down.
That's amazing.
And the one thing that I had, my only quibble about the visuals, and I don't think you noticed this, but I noticed it, is that there was a lot of twinkling. Like every time something happened or like there's a big movement, they were like twinkle, 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 twinkle. They added it's like they added confetti to the animation, and I was just like, it's like watching lens flares in Star Trek. You're like looking at it like little flashes of twinkle here and there, but ultimately that's like a small quibble in comparison to what you're supposed to get out of the show. But I don't know.
I mean, they had the movement of the hair along with the movement.
Right.
Oh,
it was enough to make me even go. So there's some handsome boys in the show. So yeah, let's give music a little bit of space, but we're definitely gonna go more into this because the music is amazing. You and I think I appreciate you watching this with me because I almost now cynically watch anime, specifically when it comes to the intros and the endings. I want to get through the shows quick. I've already probably seen several episodes on each series and stuff like that. And so I'll see the intro once or twice, and then I'll just skip it every time, much like a Netflix show. But you took the time to say, no, Kyle, I want to watch the intro. And I appreciate that because it's a great song. So let's talk about History Maker by the artist Dean Fujioka, which I think you and I, like, even now will like walk around and sing Born to Make History all the time. But
oh, I've had it in my head all week.
The whole week. Seriously, it's, you know, you're just like, Born to Make History.
It's genius.
It's amazing. And also with the visuals that they have in the intro, it really gets you amped up. So I know as a new fan why you want that is because, like, you like to be able to get into it at your own pace, and this really like slowly brings you into it. I'm just like, get me to the ice skating, get me to the story, get me to all that. But you're like, no, let's do it as it's meant to be watched. And so I really appreciate that. There's also like really good music when they do the shows. So one of the songs that they have, before we get the cart before the horse, because we'll talk about the other songs. Let's talk about the first 3 episodes. I think it really is kind of once again, like we do with most of these, is a kind of a tale of two halves. The first 3 episodes really just set up the conflict, the relationship between Yuri and Victor, you know, set up the setting, what the stakes are. And then after that, they kind of led more into like a sports anime with more competitions, more, you know, what it means to be an ice skater. So let's just talk about the first 3 and what are some big things you took out of it. So first off, set up, who's our main protagonist? What's his deal? All that stuff.
The main character is named Yuri.
Yuri.
Which, as you'll find out later, there is another Yuri.
Yeah, that was really confusing.
For some weird reason. They could have picked any other name, but they decided, okay, we'll just have a second Yuri.
We'll have 2 of them, yes.
So it starts off where he has lost a competition really badly, an ice skating competition, and feels really bad about himself. And he kind of sulks away going home.
Yeah. And he's older too, right? He's not like just getting into the sport. Like this is kind of, in terms of like skating age, he's like kind of an old man at this point.
He is. He's in his 20s.
Yeah. Which is so bizarre to think. Which is kind of bizarre to think that like he's like close to being a retiree at 23 or 22, 23, whatever he is at this show.
Yeah, but when you know anything about the sport and, you know, Olympic sports in particular, you know that that's not an uncommon thing.
Yeah, it's really like a very short window you can be competitive, which they brought up in the show as well.
So he's going home after a long time away. His family, he goes back home to his family, and they notice that he is a bit out of shape.
Yeah, that's one thing. This is like one of the big pains that I wanted to put in it, is that they fat shame Yuri like nobody's business. In fact, there was one scene that I thought was really funny where like he's like, look how fat he got. And he like wraps his hand around, the coach wraps his hand around, just starts like jiggling his belly, like,
yeah.
I was like, this show is, man, Japan is not shy about weight. Like, I feel like, you know, the United States is getting more into the idea of like body positivity, but I don't think any of the countries are anywhere close there. And this showed. So
yeah.
So he's down in the dumps, got a little bit of a paunch, but he's made it home. He lives in a hot spring, which I think is awesome. That's
an amazing setting.
Besides the boy love fantasy that you probably watched in this, Christine, I think the bigger fantasy, the bigger kind of like more porny thing that is just having a hot spring near your bedroom. Knowing you, it's like, ooh, a bath. Keep going.
Everything about this show just plays into the things that I like.
Really, that's why I was like, you know, check. You know, living next to a hot spring, check. Cute boys, you know, at the hot spring, check. All that stuff. So yeah, down in the dumps, he doesn't know what he's doing. What happened next?
So he finally decides to get back into the ice rink, and he unknowingly is being recorded by a girl that he knows who works there, and she posts it. And it gets around, people get to seeing it, and then you see that his idol Victor notices it.
Yes, the handsome Victor from this show is he's Russian, and he's also like a professional. You know, he's like the best of the best. Victor Nikiforov, if I'm saying that correctly. Yeah, so he kind of redoes Victor's routine, and someone records it and he watches it. So what does that happen? What happens there after that?
So Victor decides that he actually, since he was at his peak, it seemed like he wanted to retire, and decided to come to Yuri and coach him.
And he did it in Not like a meet you at the airport and shake your hand kind of thing, or here's my business card, you want to be my coach. How does he introduce himself, Christine?
He goes into the lovely hot spring.
Which, who wouldn't, right?
I mean, that's what I would do.
I know. And Yuri's like, oh, Victor's here? I see his dog. Oh my God, there's no way. My idol can't be at my family's hotel. So let me see. Is he in the hot spring?
It's a very dramatic way, like anything else in the show, that they would present someone like that.
Yeah. And then, but he wasn't just he more than presented himself, Christine.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he was like a Greek god.
Yes, aggressively naked
from the hot springs, and they strategically don't show certain things, but show his bare ass.
And he doesn't he can't turn off his figure skatedness. So even while he's naked, he's like, "Hi there, I'm your new coach, Victor," and poses for him with just the tiniest fountainhead covering his junk.
Yeah.
It's like, "Hi there, I'm your new coach, and here's my nude wiener," all that stuff. So yeah, they decide to. I mean, Yuri obviously says yes. I mean, there's what else happens? Let's keep talking through these first 3 shows.
Yeah. So then he immediately Victor starts working Yuri into shape right away.
He goes from pudgy to thin. Apparently, he has the superpower of becoming skinny very quickly, as opposed to other people. He's known for his stamina, so he's able to get back in shape fairly quickly. So. And
then the other Yuri comes into the picture.
You would hope that the other Yuri wouldn't be another main character, but he is a secondary, kind of pretty close character.
So this is my question.
Right.
With the name Yuri, it would be one thing if it is a popular name in Japan and there are 2 Japanese people, but there is a Japanese Yuri and a Russian Yuri.
And the weird thing is that Yuri is a Yuri plane, but Yuri P, well, that's what we'll call him, the Russian Yuri, is Yurchenska. So even that's a shortened name, and I'm like, why? Why did we do this? There was no reason for this.
No, they poke fun out of it a little bit, but it still really makes no sense.
So let's talk about Yuri P. That boy is one tough mother who also figure skates. He is this weird mix of I'm the bad boy. I got my fingerless gloves. I got my hoodie on all the time. I got flaming skulls all over my shirt. But when I'm gonna karate kick you, I can make sure it's a perfect plie. When I do a roundhouse kick on you, he's really badass for the sport that he plays.
He does it in the most fantastic way.
I know, he's still
appreciate it.
He's this skinny twig too, so he's not this he's very much like a Twinkle Toes, but he's also grrr, I got my fist that I'm gonna punch you with. It just doesn't. I don't know. It's a weird striation for me, and he's really mad that because apparently Victor wanted Victor to coach him, and he made a promise that if I do my routines without focusing on these crazy spins the quads or whatever they're called, then you'll coach me, right? And the one thing about Victor, he's very brain dead half the time. And he said, I will do it. But then he kind of skips out, goes and visits Yuri K, who was the Japanese one, and he basically takes him on as a coach. And he's like, I'll show him, and he flies off to Japan.
Yeah, Victor, as a character, he's a genius, clearly, when it comes to ice skating. And everyone loves him, just his presence.
He's very handsome, too. I mean, he can't.
Oh, yeah, he can do no wrong. But he is also very spacey.
He is a very spacey character. And also one of the things that I noticed a lot is that when he talks, there's his mouth makes a heart shape. He's like, hi, Yuri. Hey. And so he's just so carefree. He's that genius that's just too carefree for the world. And so he's a cute character. But so when we get to Yuri P, the Russian Yuri, and Yuri K, the Japanese Yuri, he realizes that, I made a mistake. I told him I was going to coach the Russian one, but the Japanese one still wants, I still promised him, so I'm going to hold a fancy competition. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what else would you do?
What else would you do? I'd make my 2 little Yuri boys fight for me on the ice. But this is we're not going to do it in the streets. We're going to do it on the ice.
And I love how he did it.
Yeah.
Because he said, I'm going to create both of your choreography.
Right.
But it is up to you to show me what you can do with it. And so he presents these 2 very opposite choreography.
Because, and also one thing to mention is that Yuri K is also very, like, meek. He's very, like, shy. And Yuri P, the Russian one, is very rough and tumble and aggressive. So it kind of leads into the styles as he's making it, you know, as he's explaining the program. So
yeah, and it seems obvious when he's presenting it which one would go with which person.
The songs is called On Love, and there's kind of two variations of it.
Yeah.
One is
Agape versus Eros.
Eros, yes, which, for those who don't know Latin, so essentially, Victor gives a song that there's two different versions of. One is this, like, sweet and tender one that's based on unconditional love. So it's very sweet, almost ballet-like. And then there's another one called Eros, which is very, like, Spanish flamenco style. There's a lot of, like a lot of that style. But it's also sexual love. And so, obviously, if you were to ask any one of us who were watching the show, we'd say, Yuri P would get the Eros and Yuri K would get the Agape. That fits their personalities. But, you know, what will happen there, Christine?
Victor said, no, I want you to show me the opposite. Get into character with it, get some inspiration for it, and show me what you got. Yeah,
and they both were not able to do this for the most part. They are, like, very much not, like, I think you see that, like, Yuri P he's not good at being innocent, so he's just like, you know, how do we do this? Like, he's like stomping around, and he's like, how am I supposed to be Agape? And then Yuri K has to think, how can I be sexual when he's never had a girlfriend, never had a relationship for the lack of a matter, and so he has to kind of visualize what would make him, you know, think of this sexual love that he now has to portray. And what is that all about?
It's kind of strange. It makes them seem like they're very juvenile.
Right, yeah.
Even though they're both in their early 20s, I believe.
I think Yuri P might be a little younger. He might be 19 because he's just entering seniors, right? He's like an 18, 19-year-old. But still, it's like they do make them seem very juvenile or that very one-dimensional in who they are as people. So
Yuri decides that
Yuri K, mind you,
that his attraction is going to be towards pork cutlet balls.
And I mean, I understand, like, the setup made sense. He's like, what is something that you can't stop thinking about? And when you think about it, it just takes over your attention and your passions. And food, to the most part, you can think elicits that need, that passion, but every time he was, like, talking about how he's going to execute his moves, he's like, I'm a sexy little pork cutlet ball. I'm a sexy little pork cutlet ball. Look at me. I'm pork cutlet ball. Look at me. I'm pork cutlet. And he doesn't do that. Like, he doesn't do like a, hey, mumbo jumbo while he's doing it. But it's just like, it really threw me off that, like, Yuri knows anything about sex in general. And I'm just like, okay, buddy, keep doing it. And then Victor doesn't help at all. Victor's like, yes, wrap yourself in the egg. You know, fry that chicken cutlet. You do it, buddy. And he's like, I'm doing it, Smith Master. I'm doing it. I'm being a little pork cutlet bowl. Ooh, put the steamed rice in. I'm just like, what is happening? But still, it seems to work. And but another thing that's interesting, as I said, Victor's a very handsome guy as well. Is that Victor is naked a lot. That's the first thing about him. And the second, and then my favorite one was that he was, like, in a split, like, doing, like, stretches in the hot tub, completely sitting there while he was talking to people in the hot tub.
That takes some guts.
And the second thing is he elicits a lot of crazy reactions out of women that he interacts with in the show.
Oh, yeah.
You actually got your first explanation of the female nosebleed. In fact, I would say, you know, you're not visually seeing my wife here, but I would say my wife looks like the owner of the skating rink there.
I have to say,
she has the glasses,
her a lot.
Like a big fan of ice skating. I believe if you didn't do the profession you do now, you would actually run an ice skating rink and, like, watch young men, you know, do pirouettes and stuff like that. And she was very, very into what both Victor and everybody else had to offer. Like, what happened? What was her reactions to all that stuff?
I mean, she was a cheerleader for all of that.
I know.
I love that about her.
Yeah.
She got so excited at points that all of a sudden she would be gushing extreme amount of blood out of her nose. It's very disturbing.
I know. And I know I've explained to you that means that the person, it's like a visual representation of sexual arousal, but in this case it's like so intense that it, like, is a rocket of blood that, like, shoots her backwards. I was like, man, this woman is thirsty for Victor, man. Let me tell you. So
I don't think he reciprocated.
No, as we get to know, she is barking up the wrong tree, or she's shooting blood at the wrong tree, really. But yeah, so what are some other takeaways you took from the first 3 episodes?
I think what we're learning at this point is that Victor and Yuri's relationship may be a little bit more than just a coach and his apprentice.
They're ready to serve each other lots of beef bowl. That's what we're kind of getting to. So yes, one of the things that I needed a little bit of research on myself to kind of explain to you about this genre, because I don't know very much about it. I know a lot about shonen, seinen, the stuff that's kind of geared towards men. It is a very male-centric, artistry of anime a lot of times with a lot of female influence. But this genre, yaoi, is by women for women. And it actually started as women writing fan fiction, much like one of your favorite properties, Twilight, or other properties like 50 Shades of Grey. It was women writing these individual stories about boy love, essentially, is what yaoi is all about. The name also comes from a portmanteau of the words Yamanashi, Ochinashi, Iminashi, which means no climax, no point, no meaning. What it means is this is essentially smut for women, and it doesn't have to go anywhere, is what yaoi means.
Okay. All right.
But I love that that's what it's meant for. And there's kind of 2 different art and things that, like some things that I got out of it on my research. The first thing is that there's much like we learned about girlfriend archetypes, there's archetypes for yaoi characters. The first is what's called the seme, and that is what we would call in American terminology the sexual top, or the active pursuer, so to speak. And then you got the uke, which is the sexual bottom, or the passive one being pursued. And it's less about, aggressive dominance over not. It's more about like pursuing versus not pursuing, and being pursued. And I think what you're finding in this show is that, Victor is the seme in the situation, and that Yuri K is the uke in the situation. Common themes you'll find in yaoi are things like forbidden relationships, depictions of rape, tragedy, and humor. Also, there's a lot of diminished female characters. As you'll notice, the females in this show are non-existent for the most part.
Yeah, I did notice that. In Japan, are gay relationships considered forbidden?
Yes, and that's a really good point, Christine. I think what you'll find is that while it's not necessarily illegal, it is very frowned upon as a social norm. And so one of the things that women like to portray in these yaois is a homosocial world, meaning that there's no homophobic relations. And no point in Yuri on Ice and no part in these yaois are people going, look at those gay men doing their thing. They're essentially showing a world in which this is what happens when men are just allowed to have the love that they're able to have.
I see.
Right. But the one thing that's interesting, this is something that I have to disclaim, is that we are 2 cis straight people talking about gay culture. So everything we say here is going to be surface level, but this is kind of like yaoi kind of is more for the admiration and pleasure of women. It's in service of women. But then there's another genre called bara, which is similar to yaoi, but it's men love. So this is written by gay men for gay men, for the express purpose of gay men having that relationship. Right. So once again, a disclaimer aside, one thing I want to point out is that Yuri on Ice got a lot of credit from the LGBTQIA community for its depiction of the relationship that Yuri and Victor has. So spoiler alert, they have a male-male relationship. So, what were you taking from it? What are some things that you took from their relationship together that you might not see in other places? Like, the first thing I noticed was none of them were caricatures of gay men, right? None of them, they were just normal people who just happened to be gay. I think that was the first thing you'll find in this show. Because if you watch figure skating, a lot of times people have that depiction of men who do figure skating and what they feel, the Dickie Buttons of the world, the ones that are very flamboyant and all that stuff.
I mean, they didn't really play too much into flamboyancy.
Right.
They did, there were certain things where it makes sense for ice skating. You got to think about the costume.
There's feathers and glitter and all that stuff. Yeah,
and even Yuri P. in Russia, how he took on ballet. It was interesting in that scene how they talked about he wants to be female. He wants to be feminine when he does his moves. So he really leaned into ballet,
right,
which was beautiful.
And it wasn't like he walked in and said, "I want a more feminine, artistry." No one said like, "But you're a boy." No one ever questioned that, which I thought was really great. And it normalized the romance and didn't focus as much on the sex.
Yeah, it was very flirtatious.
Right.
But it didn't seem to cross any lines. At least I only saw the first few episodes and didn't see their relationship really progress really far.
No.
They just play into subtle little things where, Yuri is really nervous and Victor will put his hand subtly on his shoulder, or the scene where his lips are really chapped on the ice.
Yeah. He's like, "Let me get that for you." And it's like, and there's a really close, sensually circles Yuri's lips and stuff like that. I think you and I both looked at each other and like, well, that was subtle. And then not only that, but also like things like, he's like, "Well, what do I want to think about when I want to depict Eros?" And then he looks right at Victor, and Victor goes, he gives that like, "Woo" kind of thing. Yeah. So it's playful. It's playfully flirty.
It's really playful. It does it in a really fun way, and it's interesting, though, that this is made for women.
Yes.
And that they focus on these male characters who are kind of dealing with their sexuality and how to approach relationships and even be public about it. I think that's really interesting that there's a Japanese subculture for women who embrace that really well.
Right. Yeah, I think that's interesting. There's this one subculture in Japan called fujoshi, which means rotten girl. But those are women that also like yaoi because of its kind of more pornographic nature. And I think, but what I also think about this, like male boy love romance, just like Yuri on Ice is that, and maybe you can speak more to this than I ever could, but what a lot of women say who enjoy this genre is that it's love without the power dynamic. So when you watch, especially if you watch romance in a heteronormative relationship, there's a power dynamic. Usually it's like a boss to a secretary, or just like the social norms that make women less than men in these societies. And so why I've heard a lot of women who like yaoi is because it takes that power out of it, and you can just focus on the romance. But does that kind of speak to you as an American, or is that something
that does resonate with me? So a couple of things. The first thing is how women are depicted in rom-coms, specifically in American culture, are really cringeworthy. They really play into stereotypes of the woman who is, "Poor me, I need to be saved by a man."
Like Maid in Manhattan's like a perfect example of this. Like,
don't you dare, because I love J-Lo.
I had to poke the bear when I could. I know you're a huge J-Lo fan.
But I know where you're going with this.
Let's say that J-Lo didn't do that movie, and you just talked about the story alone. It's a maid who has like a billionaire that loves her, and like it gives her purpose, even though she's like a service worker. But that's a power dynamic. Like, even though love's part of it and they don't care about the power dynamic, it still exists.
There always is some sort of portrayal of that in men and women in front of a camera. For some reason, it never seems to get it quite right. It always kind of plays that up. As a woman watching two men exploring a potential romantic relationship, I have to say, obviously I'm a person who is very open and completely supportive of the LGBTQ community. And I root them on.
And it's very easy to root them on, really. It's not like they're like structurally flawed human beings. Just like one is like trying to find himself, the other one is kind of at the end of his career, and they're just kind of finding each other in this midway.
Yeah, I mean,
not a lot of stress in that.
Yuri is the type of person who is very hard on himself.
Right.
He doesn't have a lot of self-esteem. Victor sees him in a crowd when he feels like no one else sees him, and sees who he could be. That that, you know, that's something that we all aspire for in a partner. But there definitely is a little bit of a power dynamic that we can't just ignore talking about,
like
because Victor is, you know, the experienced one with
actual professional
career.
experience too. He's got like actual accolades and sponsorships, and he has money and influence and stuff like that. He's
treated like a celebrity in town. And so Yuri is the person who just lets Victor take the lead and takes more of that submissive role.
I see. Yeah, there it still has that little bit of that problematized aspect that we were talking about before, and I think it does. But relationships are complicated, and I think it leads into that. Like, it lets it be what it's going to be, and because I don't need relationships to be perfect. I just need them to be real and show those kind of things. And one other thing that because this got a lot of great positive reviews from the LGBTQ community, specifically the figure skating community that loved it. I know you're a huge fan of Adam Rippon, who when he was in one of his championships, or I think at the Olympics, he was holding a pillow from a character with a character from Yuri on Ice on it. So he likes the show, and we also watched an interview with Johnny Weir, who really supports Yuri on Ice. So I mean, it's especially Adam Rippon, who I think you can speak on a little bit, especially for what he did at Sochi, is really important, and maybe you can expound on that.
I think, certainly the dynamic of going to the Russian Olympics and being an openly gay athlete was a very big deal. And it just shows you how certain parts of the world really just aren't accepting of people just because of their sexuality. And I appreciate that actually in Yuri on Ice that they have a few Russian characters involved in it and say, hey, it doesn't matter where you're from. You can have those tendencies too.
Although Putin says, no, there's no gay men in my country, this show is saying that, yes, it's make it visible and make it represented and stuff. And we talked about this. It's great that for one of the less more heteronormative societies like Russia, which it's illegal to be gay, and Japan, which is just, it's a tisk situation, that the two main characters, they both come from that country. I think that's a really strong statement to have those two be that. And then one last thing that we're going to kind of before we jump off to the rest of the show is there was a disappointment that people had in the show in the first kiss that they had, in that the arm was blocking the kiss between Victor and Yuri.
That must have come past episode 5.
We before we rewatched it, we definitely got to that point. I don't think you remember because you didn't have to watch that part for us to prepare for this. But they had their first kiss in like episode 7, I think, and there was an arm blocking it, and so there's still that Japanese sentiment of like, we still can't be too explicit about it, and that was a little bit of disappointment.
Well, at least they didn't pixelate it like they do.
He jumps in, he tries to kiss him, and there's this big pixelated head. Oh my god, that would be too much. And you know what? There's like cases of horror in which there's like actual blood happening, and they do pixelate that stuff.
Oh gosh.
But like that would be insane. Oh my god. Oh, that'd be the worst. All right, so we're going to go and end up on episode 4 and 5, and we're really going to talk about the sport of figure skating.
Yeah.
The first question I have is, did it discuss and or explain the sport well? And I know that what's crazy about this show, and I know for me as someone who doesn't really watch the sport, is when they're explaining it, like the championships, the event, what happens during it, they go through like these very quick cut scenes of going like, and then we go this, and I was like, I couldn't follow it.
Yeah.
But you knew it, so maybe you could follow it. So tell me, did it discuss the sport well? Did it explain it well?
As someone who knows the sport very well, yes, I think they did a good job with it. I think they almost expect you to.
Like, they're not expecting you to be like me, who's like, just for the sake of anime and for a podcast, I'm going to watch this, or just so my wife can enjoy one.
I don't think you need to in order to watch it and enjoy it, just for lots of different reasons. But I felt like I already had a hand up on it because I already knew a lot about it. And, you know, there are things that they say, that they mention.
Like
about,
toe loops and triple Lutzes, and I was like, I don't know what those are, but
you don't need to.
Right. Yeah, I think that's true.
But it's
did he land it or did he not land? Is what you really need to know.
It's really impressive when you know ice skating to hear the different quadruple.
Because those are really hard, right?
They're very hard. When they mention that they're going to do it at the end of a program,
because you're gassed by that point, right?
Yeah, it's beyond very, very, very challenging.
Wow! Oh my God! So. Yeah, so let's talk about let's just talk about the sport and the figure skating itself. We talked about the motion looking really good.
Yeah.
Did you think that when they did their program that it looks like an actual program? Did it look good? Did it look like something a figure skater would do? Did they make it like a superpower in which a person spins 400 feet in the air and lands on the ice? Like what did you take in terms of its reality versus being good figure skating?
Yeah. So first there are two different programs.
Right.
So there is a short program and there is a long program.
Right.
They touched on both of those, at least in the episodes that we watched.
And we really just kind of like met the short programs for like the first three episodes because that's what kind of get your foot in the water of it before you get to the long program.
I have to say a lot of it is very realistic. First, the music that they use is so professional.
Oh my God, yeah. And in fact, I think we're going to play probably music while you explain this. So go ahead, Christine. Yes, while we listen to a little bit of Eros, a little passionate merengue. And I can hear it now. So, let's talk about Yuri's performance, for example. Like,
it really spanned the entire rink very well. It didn't speed things up to an unreasonable rate. And it wasn't too much.
Right, like we see sometimes, like we watched another gymnastics anime preview in which someone did a flip and he almost touched the ceiling. Like it actually like had the height right, it had the speed right. There was no flashing or like powering up. There was no cartoonification of it. It was
very realistic. It showed when, you know, he wobbled or like he didn't get the landings quite right, because that's very realistic when you do very, very hard jumps, especially in the beginning of a season. People tend to mess it up.
Right.
So in that sense, I would say it was great. I know I haven't watched other sports animes, but I know from what I've heard from you and Garrett, like the tennis anime, that they have more of like a superpower that's involved in it. This, I would say, is really just about what humans can be capable of in ice skating.
And what I thought was interesting is that, like, I don't feel like I understood the scoring very, very well, because I think you and I both acknowledged this, that, like, Yuri had his long-form program where he did the signature Yuri on Ice music, and I'll play that as well right now, the Yuri on Ice song, which is beautiful. They actually danced to this song at the competition. I think Kenji Miyamoto did that. Is that he got first place even though he jumped and went face first into a wall, one that busted his face wide open, and he still got first place. I know you and I were like, I'm like, is that a deduction? Is blood a deduction?
Because of all the competitions I've ever seen, I have never seen someone bash their face in. And if you do that, there is no
non-erotic nosebleed either. He just like straight up broke his nose.
There's no way you're finishing that competition. That was outrageous.
It's also like a health hazard to have like people skating in your blood now. Was your frozen blood on the ice? He was just he literally was like spin and bam, and then he got first place. I was like, I'm like, I'm sure someone did, or maybe because he did things that were difficult. I don't know, because you told me that like the more technical points you have, and now that's where figure skating going. You want to do harder stuff more than you do want to do it well, and I think it makes people do a lot of risky stuff, and so maybe that's what happened here.
Yes. Ice skating used to be much more about the artistic qualities of it, but you know, some coaches and some athletes have realized that once you incorporate a lot more jumps into it, a lot more difficult jumps, then you can just rack up the points. And so that changes the sport a bit. I think I appreciate, and I don't know how long ago this anime was, but that
it's 2017, so it was about 4 years ago.
Okay. Well,
right after Sochi.
It kind of brings you back to what it was about, and it may have been just kind of at the cutting edge of where all these really, really challenging jumps have come more into play, but didn't really take away from it back then.
Because I want to liken it to like a basketball player who used to just do a lot of layups and dunks, are now just shooting straight up half-court shots over and over and over again, just knowing that they're each 3 points. So
yeah, what's the fun in watching that?
You know. So I honestly think that I really liked it. I think visually, for me, one of the things that I thought was a little distracting for me is that it's very tough to do both the movement of the skater with the illusion of him gliding on ice. It kind of looked like the ice was the stationary object and the guys were moving on it.
Yeah.
I thought that, but I mean, I can only ding it so much for that.
How could you really do it better than that without using the real thing?
Right. And so I give it a little bit of a ding for that it kind of gave me a little bit of distraction, but I did like that it wasn't just them spinning and doing lutzes. They also did a lot of performance aspects, a lot of the poses, and a lot of
times it wasn't just about what they were performing. It was about their internal dialogue going.
So rule number 2 of sports anime, which is it's talked exclusively by internal monologues and external observers. It holds true in this. You can't just watch figure skating. You have to watch someone going like, is he going to do that a third triple in a row, or is he going to do this? Oh, is he? What's he thinking about? What's the story that he's coming up with? And that was a question I had. I'm like, do people literally have stories where they're going like, now here comes the lover as she does this? Did they do that in figure skating? Was a question I had, but
I mean, I have never done competitive ice skating myself.
But like, do the announcers do that? Like, here comes the part where the princess jumps over the castle walls.
No.
Okay, because like, that's what they did in this anime, and I'm like, I mean, that would make it exciting if we're telling a story. Well, Adam Rippon was doing his third triple lutz or whatever it's called.
It's important as an artist to have that inspiration and to have that to get you through a very, very difficult performance. And it is a performance. It's not necessarily the same as certain athletes who are just running down a field and scoring.
It has subjective judging.
It does. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the one thing I always have trouble figuring out, like, the difference between like the subjective judging aspect versus the athleticism. But this show does a pretty decent job of explaining that to me, so I feel like I have a little bit more understanding of figure skating now, and it seems that it's got the accuracy that we're looking for in this show. But before we close up, Christine, I almost called you Garrett. Christine, what we do here is there's 2 questions that I ask Garrett that I'm going to ask you here. The first is, are you going to keep watching? Would you keep watching this show?
Oh, heck yeah.
I remember we ended up with the 5th episode where he goes, my theme is love, and it's my love for Victor, and it was a nice big moment, and it was a very emotional moment for you.
Oh.
Yeah.
And with not having the Olympics this year, I need this.
It was like an itch you needed scratch, and it did a good job of it.
Completely.
And so what are some hopes that you have? That's one thing I like, knowing that you've got a few more episodes ahead of you. These usually go about 13 episodes per season. Probably get another 7. There might be a second season of it. What do you hope happens? What do you hope to see? What do you hope to learn?
I obviously root for the main character, Yuri. I want to see him continue to succeed and continue to build himself up and grow into the person that he wants to be.
So you're more focused on his ice skating accomplishments over the romance itself.
No, I don't exclude one from the other.
Right.
Obviously the emotional part of it too is seeing how he is with Victor. The only thing that bugs me a little bit with Victor is that he is very surface level in the way that he interacts. Like, he never really needs to work hard to get what he wants.
Right.
So you don't really get to see his vulnerabilities as much. I hope that maybe we get to see a little bit more.
You only get like a sniff of like his inner turmoil of being like kind of almost done with his career, essentially.
Yeah.
You only get a little whiff of it, but you don't really dive into it in the first 6 episodes. And I want to see that more. Is there anything else you're hoping to find out from this show?
I wonder how Yuri P ends up.
Just hearing Yuri P's, I was like, what's happening? I'm sorry. Now I'm caught up here.
I wonder if he softens as well.
Do you think they're setting up a love triangle? Because I'm not sure with Yuri P. Because I know he admires Victor. I don't think he's in love with Victor. I don't think it's the same as Yuri either. So
no, but I think that he has a lot to develop with his character.
He's still pretty young as with the other characters, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so that's good, and I hope that you get to find that out because I'm sure we'll have it again in this house. But the last thing that we usually do is what's called the Weeb and Noob score, and this is more of a Super Noob score.
Ooh.
Now, I have to explain this to you much like I would everybody else for the first time. The Weeb and Noob score doesn't say whether it's good or not. It pretty much explains what priority it should have in your overall digest of the show. So if you give it a high score, it pretty much means don't even listen to this podcast anymore. Go out and watch it now. A low score means just like, know it's there and just like give it a month or two, or don't even watch it at all. Or there's other things that resemble this. It also means it's really tough to watch if it's got a low score. So I'll start first. I would give this show, honestly, a 9. I think it exemplifies a new genre for me, and I think that's exciting for me. I think for what it's doing to the genre for people who might not normally watch it, I'm super appreciative of it. I appreciate what it's doing. I think visually it's stunning. I think the music hits it out of the park. So even though while this is not the story that I tend to glom on, the exterior components of it, the music, the visuals, the motion, the sport, the romance, like I think all together it would still make it interesting for me to keep watching. And I bet like all the women that are listening to this would probably hit me with a harpoon if they heard me say bad about the show, because this show is loved by the ladies.
And your wife.
And my wife, who is also a lady. So Christine, what is your Super Noob review of the score? What do you give it out of 10?
I mean, I have to give it a really high score. It has really everything I could ask for. It has the topic that I absolutely love. It has some really sweet romantic elements to it. It has characters that you root for. And it is just visually beautiful to watch. It's a feel-good type of show.
I don't think there's like, while there was conflict and there was like stuff that I was like, oh, I feel bad for that. Like, I don't feel like it necessarily disappointed me in any way, shape, or form. Like, it wasn't dead in any way, shape, or form. It didn't have like shallow cues of like, although they did have a spoiler at a point where an animal got hurt, and I was not happy with that. But that's a different story for a different time. I think that's cheap emotions in my mind. So what's the overall number score that you want to give it?
I'd give it a 9.5.
There we go. I knew that was coming too. That is not a surprise to me at all. But I think of the stuff that I made you watch, this has got to be one of the best ones you've got.
Yeah.
Of course. So, and knowing you're going to keep watching, it's really exciting. It means, and so it's good. That means I can also cater things that I know you like.
And there are no jiggly boobs in it. So
yes.
That.
But there's plenty of like V's to the man's crotch area. So. Well, depending on what kind of gutters you're looking for in your body shape, you get plenty of that with Victor. So, thank you, Christine, for being a wonderful and super supportive co-host, guest host. And it's always important to hear your thoughts because you are my partner in life, but also my partner now in anime watching.
And it's important to see that there is anime that is more female-based because anime just seems like a very male-driven type of thing.
Right, absolutely. I want to hear your thoughts. Was Yuri Nice the type of show that really got you excited about the idea of figure skating and anime in general? Did you like the visuals and the music and the motion of figure skating? Or something that didn't really quite hit your palate because of, the subject matter, or just like didn't quite hit your palate? Let us know in the comments below because we really want to hear your thoughts on the story. Once again, subscribe to our Anchor, as well as give us a 5-star review on anywhere your podcasts are found. Before we close, Christine, do you have any final last sentence thoughts about Yuri on Ice?
I love ice skating.
And that's good enough for us. So her and I are going to go in a duet in which we try triple lutzes and triple axles and anything else that combines double, triple with some random word. And we're all going to give you a fantastic see you next time.
Bye.